are live. Welcome back. This is episode number 51 of Kalibrated with Scott. I'm Scott, of course. We have a lot to talk about today, so I'm just going to hop right in. I'm going to start with the counteroffensive. The Ukrainians are currently attacking in three different sectors: Kherson, Zaporozhye, and Bakhmut. I'm going to start with Zaporozhye, and I'm going to put up a map right now so you guys can see where I'm talking about. If you look at these arrows, you can see the 2 points of egress for the Ukrainians in their attack. One near Orkhiv and one near Rivnopol on the ledge right here. The Ukrainians have, I would say, basically completely failed on this front. They have yet to achieve any primary strategic goal. The only really strategic goal that they've actually captured or achieved is the capture of Rivnopol, which happened recently. However, this is what was expected to be captured within the first 24 hours of the launch of this counteroffensive, not the first 24 days. So that's kind of a big deal. And if you don't know, we are D+24. So we are 24 days into this counteroffensive. We're coming up on 4 weeks fast, and the Ukrainians have achieved almost nothing. The next front that I wanted to talk about is the Bakhmut front. On the Bakhmut front, the Ukrainians are attacking on the flanks of Bakhmut, and I think that this is either a fixing or a pulling operation where they want the Russians to rotate reinforcements to Bakhmut to help prevent any Ukrainian progress there. However, the Ukrainians are making very little progress. I'm talking hundreds of meters, maybe, every couple of days in certain directions. Nothing big, nothing super dire or threatening, and the Ukrainians are taking a lot of casualties to achieve this. So once again, just another shot in the dark. It's kind of failing. So the Bakhmut front is like a tertiary thing. I'm not focusing on it very heavily. I'm kind of tired of talking about Bakhmut, and I really don't see the point of the AFU attack in this sector. Just more meat into the meat grinder. I have no idea what their obsession with this place is. They should have just let it go and moved on, but they refused to do that. So here we are. And the final place that the Ukrainians are trying offensive actions is in Kherson. They have a small bridgehead now across the Antonovsky Bridge right in the middle of Kherson city. And they're just kind of sitting under this bridge. They're saying that the, force accumulation is about 50 people. They just come across on boats and they sit under this bridge and get hit by artillery shells. That's basically what's going on. The West has announced another aid package. This aid package is going to include 30 Bradley IFVs, 25 Stryker APCs, HIMAR missiles, Stingers, Patriot air defense missiles, and Javelins. These aren't aid packages. I don't want you guys to think about these as aid packages anymore. There's nothing aiding about them. They're not random. They're organized, and they're just logistics now. This is just logistics for a NATO war. You have a NATO-trained army in Ukraine now. You have a NATO-equipped army in Ukraine, and you basically have a NATO-run army. They use NATO tactics, and there's probably NATO leadership calling some sort of military shots in this whole thing, or at least giving advice and pointers. We did get a leak from a pro-Ukrainian source, They just more openly talk about the negative aspects of Ukraine. A lot of people will call Resident, who is the source, a pro-Russian account, but they call everybody a pro-Russian account. Any pro-Ukrainian account that ends up going against the narrative is pro-Russian instantly. So take this with a grain of salt, obviously, but what Resident is reporting is that their source in the office of the president has said that Ukraine during this counteroffensive has lost 41 Leopard 2s. So that's the different models of Leopard 2, 2A4 and 2A6, 19 155 millimeter M777 howitzers, 4 self-propelled PZH 2000s. That's the German self-propelled artillery that has been delivered to Ukraine. Losing 4 of those is a major deal. That's a big deal. Those are not systems that will be replaced. Those are crucial losses, and I think probably the most important losses on this list. They've also lost 32 M113 armored personnel carriers. They've lost 7 BMP Marauders. They've lost 31 M2 Bradleys. They've lost 15 YPR 765s, another APC. They've lost 40 units of MRAP, International Max Pro. They've lost 90 units of various fighting vehicles and 3 MiG-29 fighters. So that's what Resident says the losses of the Ukrainian armed forces are. And I just want to now take you to the aid package or logistics convoy that's coming in. And it is basically exactly covering the losses of the armed forces of Ukraine throughout this counteroffensive. We're looking at 30 Bradleys, which 32 Bradleys lost, 30 Bradleys gained is almost exactly what they needed. This is also old numbers. So those 2 extra losses could have happened in the last couple of days. This package was designed before that. So just covering the basic losses. 25 Striker APCs, which is also covering the APC losses of the M113s, the Marauders, so on and so forth. And then you're just looking at ammunition supplies, HIMARS, Stingers, Patriots, and Javelins. Just the basic things you need to keep the war going, to maintain some sort of air defense capabilities, some deep strike capabilities, and so on and so forth. But if you look at this, you can see that this entire aid package now has no Soviet equipment. That pool has completely run dry, and now the logistics coming in are purely NATO assets. There was an event that occurred that I would like to talk about, and that is the Kramatorsk strike. We had a significant casualty event that occurred in Kramatorsk, which is a city in the Donetsk People's Republic. It's controlled by the Ukrainians. It is a rear staging and logistics city for Bakhmut, Seversk, and the LPR, like the Liman area and so on. This area is teeming with AFU. It is the brain of the operation in the east. And so, that's a target-rich environment. And what ended up happening was the Russians struck a restaurant, I guess you would call it. It's kind of a hotel bar meeting area. Very popular, apparently, with the AFU. And, right when it happened, the first claims, the Ukrainian claims specifically, the initial claim was that the restaurant had only civilians in it, and the Russians had once again committed an act of terror, which, I wait for evidence before I make decisions on that. Could it have been an act of terror? Possibly. Was it? You're going to find out. The initial Russian claim, which was what the MOD released about 12, 15 hours later, something like that, was that the Russians had caused a significant strike against AFU officers and mercenary personnel that were using this location for a party/meeting. And, I didn't know what to believe. Both sides are going to say whatever makes them look the best. But the proof started coming out, and I'm going to post some of that up. So initially, we got the first videos of the strike. We're seeing the building kind of on fire. And this is very interesting because the Russians, the Ukrainians that are all standing around the building, if you look at the vehicles, they're all trucks and SUVs, which is something suspicious just from the start. And the specific types of trucks that they're driving around, they are basically military technical vehicles. And I don't mean technical like they have machine guns on the back or anything, but they're vehicles that were civilian and now have been modified for military use with paint and markings, basically. So AFU vehicles. And the first wounded in action we saw from this strike, the first casualties, was a man laying on the ground and 2 guys providing first aid to him. And it is funny because in Kramatorsk, I don't know if you know the common language there. It's Russian or Ukrainian, and these guys are all speaking English, perfect English with American accents. So instantly,
you're listening.
Well, that's a lot of English for the Eastern Ukraine.
Nod your head if you can hear us.
And maybe the Russians were telling the truth that there were some mercenaries here. after this came out, the Ukrainians came out, or the Ukrainian information space came out and basically said, no, 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 this was a place where journalists hang out. So now the Russians are targeting not civilians, but journalists, still civilians, but, you know, journalists, different kind of designation in the combat zone. And, you know, that's all well and good. We'll see what happens there. And then the next set of evidence came out. We started to see in that video where they're speaking English, on the guy's forearm, you can see a tattoo, which is it resembles the Ranger 3rd Battalion tattoo. We also saw different guys wearing different 101st Airborne and stuff like that. Does that mean that they're actually a part of these organizations? Not necessarily, but the fact that you have so much military present right after this strike and not, you know, civilian rescue on the team or on the scene, sorry, is a it's a red flag, to say the least. You should see a lot more firefighters and just normal rescue there, and and first responders, and that's just not what we were seeing. And then as the day slowly progressed, people started to really dig into this, and we started to get a lot of information about the guys who were talking about it. And, you know, the thing about Americans is they love to talk, and it's actually probably what got this military meeting struck was poor OPSEC. We have hundreds, not hundreds, but, you know, it feels like hundreds of Instagram posts from these mercenaries that are in, and I'm going to just go ahead and give a caveat here. These men are mercenaries. They are, I guess, technically legally fighting for Ukraine, but they are performing the same tasks that a mercenary would. They are not Ukrainian born. They are not Ukrainian citizens. They flew from a different country to come and fight, whether they were pushed by money, which I highly doubt since they joined the AFU, or they're just looking for action. There's still that kind of mercenary vibe that comes along with them, and they're out of place because they're English speaking and, you know, English or American culture. So they started posting, and one specifically, which I'll show in just a second, but they started posting things up like, this is the place where we came out to eat regularly. This is a civilian target, and I can't believe the Russians did this. Well, if there's a bunch of military guys in there eating all around civilians, that's a legitimate target. That's what we call collateral damage. It's super unfortunate. It happens every time anybody strikes anything. The US does it all the time with their drone strikes. There's a risk calculus where if there are a certain number of civilians next to a certain number of high value targets or just targets in general, that risk assessment can be, considered collateral damage, and you take the shot. That's what the Russians did here. I have yet to see any really serious civilian casualties, but most of the people are buried under the rubble. So we're still waiting for confirmation on that. And then later on, we got even more evidence that kind of proves the Russian Ministry of Defense correct, and proves my assumption correct of what happened here. We had a picture taken from somebody inside of the cafe or the diner or restaurant, whatever you want to call it, about 20 minutes before the missile strike. He's still alive. He ended up leaving. He ate a very delicious looking pizza, but you can see it right in front of you. And then in the background, you can see two oddly military looking men that look like they're talking at some sort of meeting. And this would confirm what the Ukrainians the Russians had said, that this was a officer meeting that involved mercenaries, what they would consider mercenaries, people that are not Ukrainian fighting in Ukraine, and that a lot of them were unalived through this event. Just with that picture, you might not still have enough evidence to say that, this strike was necessary, it achieved its goals, so on and so forth. But then we got this video, and I'm going to put it up right now. And as you can see, he basically just said right there that
look what these bastards are doing to this country.
There are soldiers under the rubble, and he's talking about how it is that these guys are under the rubble, and that they, they can't get to them, but he's admitting that there are soldiers under this rubble. So the Ukrainian narrative of it being civilians and journalists, it's complete crap. That's not what happened. It's not reality. And once again, we have another false flag. Russia is a bunch of terrorists when really they're actually striking a proper target, and the Ukrainians just don't have a way of dealing with that. The last thing I wanted to talk about today is the Prigozhin situation. There's a high-level meeting occurring right now between Prigozhin, his high command, and the Russian government. They're going through further negotiations. We do know now that 12 Russian servicemen were killed, all pilots, or all airmen, sorry. 10 of them died on the IL-22 that was shot down, and 2 died on the Ka-52 that was shot down. These are significant losses. This is a very sad event. I'm still curious if Prigozhin or anybody in the Wagner organization is going to have murder charges placed on top of them. But as for right now, Prigozhin and Wagner are allowed to move to Belarus and, you know, kind of be there in exile under Lukashenko's watch. This is very confusing to me, and this is still making my gut turn. You know, after somebody does something like this, especially in a country like Russia, you would expect some sort of event to occur or some sort of, you know, hard response. That's not what we're seeing. And so my big question I wanted to ask you guys is, why is Prigozhin alive? Is Prigozhin alive because this was some sort of deal that was just agreed upon? Putin was not looking for blood in the streets. You know, he didn't want this to turn into an actual conflict. He slowed down the convoy until it was outside of Moscow, and then a deal was negotiated, and he, you know, rather bloodlessly avoided a major conflict on Russian soil. Is that why he's alive? Is he alive because it was, you know, he was in on something? Is he alive because it would look really bad to unalive him right now, and, you know, you can just do it later at a more discreet time? Who knows? That's what I'm still very curious about. I'm still curious as to how the Wagner transition is going to work, if Wagner is even going to remain in existence. Most of Wagner and Wagner's heavy equipment, you know, air defense, tanks, stuff like that, has been returned to the Russian Ministry of Defense. A good number of Wagner have signed contracts with the Russian Ministry of Defense. So this whole thing is kind of done in a way. I don't think it's done, but it is kind of wrapped up nice and neatly with a little bow on it. And I was having discussions with people about whether this makes Putin weak. Does this event weaken Putin's position? And I'm curious to hear your guys' thoughts on it. But from my perspective, Putin avoided a conflict on Russian territory. He avoided spilling Russian blood against Russians, and he kind of showed that this was not such a big deal. He wasn't really concerned about it. You know, he didn't have to start hammering these guys and killing them. He has a strong enough control in Russia, a very strong control in Russia. His position is very secure, that he didn't have to react in the way that, you know, somebody in a weaker position would have to react. This could be like a little bit of cope. I don't know. But to me, it feels like he handled it well. I don't think the international community is going to be looking at this negatively in any way. I think it would have been much worse if there would have been an actual conflict within Russia. I think that makes the country look much more unstable. This makes it look like Putin can deal with internal issues while completely maintaining the SMO, while completely maintaining foreign relations. This was just a small little bump in the road that almost nobody felt. The only reason it was so blown out of proportion and it got so over the top was because of, one, the rhetoric from Prigozhin and, you know, Putin back and forth, and the MOD, as well as the West fomenting this, trying to make it into a coup, you know, make it way bigger than it actually was. Putin didn't lose here. I don't see where Putin has lost so far. There were no changes made to the Ministry of Defense or the General Staff, which was part of what people thought the negotiations would have been, and what it's really, or what the negotiations would have been about, and what they assumed would happen. They were expecting Grosmo and Shoigu to both be removed. That hasn't happened. It could happen in the future. Still waiting to see. So this is not a closed case yet. However, it is appearing as though they're going to stay. They're still making appearances. Putin is doing normal stuff. He was on a subway the other day, the first one of the new trains in Russia. And, there's an SMO going on. If you look at what Zelensky's doing, Zelensky has no other focus at all. He has no intention of doing any public service stuff, any of the, I don't know, just the politician things, the things that people do when they're not in war, going to openings and events and, touring military facilities and stuff like that. Zelensky is in a bunker somewhere with his green jumpsuit on, working on this conflict 24/7. Meanwhile, Putin is maintaining the country. I just think it kind of goes to show what the mindset in Russia is towards this SMO, how they feel about it, what direction they think it's going in. They don't seem concerned. They don't seem worried. Putin seems strong as ever. The Russian military is still clicking. The SMO didn't skip a beat during this whole thing. I'm going to put it aside for now because I'm kind of done talking about Wagner. They're not my favorite. So I think that's where I'm going to end it today. Just a quick sit rep of what's happened. I would implore you all to look into the Kramatorsk strike and see what you can find out about it. But it looks like some mercenaries got their teeth kicked in. So, go on a safari and find out. That's how it works, especially when you're going on a safari against the Russian Federation. Yeah. But until next time, guys, if you wouldn't mind liking, subscribing, follow me on Twitter and Telegram. That's the best way you can support me. Share this video with your friends. Share it on your Twitter. Share it on whatever. Just get it around. It helps me so much. I really appreciate it. And take care, everybody. Bye.